Yeah, it's
But
counterintuitive. Like in the city, it's a counterintuitive thing to pick something up and eat it, right?
yeah, you probably don't want to do that too much. Uh, Cigarette butts don't make the best wild edibles, but
Yeah.
uh,
Welcome to another edition of Dirty Work. My name is Dennis, and today I have a very special guest with us today to speak about what they love. Adam Berkelmans, who is the Intrepid Eater. Adam, hello, 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 and hello.
hello there.
Welcome. Thank you for joining me. You and I have spoken about food on and off for years. I think that's probably the biggest touchstone of our conversations. So I was really excited that you wanted to join with me and do this conversation on my channel, which is still growing. The more we talk and the more that you tell me that you're into, the more interested I get in talking more. So to have this opportunity for me is a joy. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to talking about all this stuff kind of officially with you. It's fun.
Why don't we start with your handle on Instagram?
The.intrepid.eater on Instagram and the Intrepid Eater on Facebook and YouTube. So yeah, if you want to check out any of my stuff, you can follow me through there. And then I also have a website called theintrepid.eater.com where I post recipes and travelogues and how-tos and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, if you're interested in seeing what I do, you can check out any or all of the above.
It's kind of a left field start, but what was your favorite meal growing up?
That's actually a weirdly tough one because I have a hard time picking favorites. I make so many different things and love so many different things. But honestly, I guess one thing I really liked was going to either of my grandparents, my grandmother on my dad's side or my grandparents on my mom's side, because the food tasted different.
Oh yeah.
And they just did, because my parents cooked pretty good. They was like pretty decent healthy meals. We didn't eat out much at all, so but it was very it was kind of a regimented, the 5 to 10 kind of meals in rotation. But when I went to my grandparents' house, things tasted different. They used different seasonings. They cooked things a little differently, and the food wasn't crazy different, but just tasted different, and it really kind of excited my taste buds and made me think a lot about the food and wonder why it was different. Or I have a Dutch background. My grandparents came over from Holland.
Me too.
Oh, do you? There you go. Yeah. So I think they used Dutch spices and just slightly different things, and that was always my favorite. Getting to try new food, even if it was recognizable, but just slightly different.
Yeah. I can totally relate. Nuzzy was something that I ate a lot of, which was basically like a rice dish that you cook the rice in with usually a pork bone of some kind, and it just sort of completely disintegrates. And there's spices like Maggi and there's definitely some curry spices in there too. There's some turmeric for sure because it's a very yellow dish. That was something as a kid growing up with Dutch roots I can relate to. But was it just that the food was different that really kind of, and I'm not sure what age we're talking about here. How old were you?
From super early. I've been interested in food or obsessing about food since I was probably a toddler. Anything that sparked something in my brain that was a little different than normal really stood out, and then I really spent time thinking about it. I think even as a very small child, I was a very adventurous child too, so things wouldn't turn me off. There were some strange things that I didn't love, like cheese or apple juice, which most kids, that's all they eat.
Yeah.
There's another Dutch food that's smoked eel. All over that as a 6 or 7 year old. My dad would play around sometimes, and he roasted a chicken one time, and it looked really weird to me for some reason. It didn't look right. And I was asking him why it didn't look right, and he said, well, it's because it's an African toad. And I cooked it up for dinner, and I was like, okay, let me have some and see what it's like.
So that curiosity, because a lot of kids, the picky eater child is like a trope. Maybe it's fair to say that skipped your generation for you, that food curiosity was almost, would you say it was even a dominant characteristic in you, even as a child?
Absolutely, yeah. I spent, my parents tell stories about me just staring into the fridge. I always get yelled at to close the door because I'd just be staring and putting things together in my mind, or build these ridiculous sandwiches. Before I could cook. Like I built these ridiculous, I called them monster sandwiches, and they just
Yeah.
had everything in the fridge on them.
Amazing.
And then I was, standing on a stool to cook on the stove at 7 years old. Just,
My God.
I couldn't wait till I was big enough to do it. I would say like the two dominant traits in my life were nature, being outside of nature, and cooking. Yeah, you could easily define me as a child between those two things.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny too because I get a lot of my love of cooking from my father. There are stories of him when he was a kid. One of my favorites was he liked corn syrup so much that he would hide in the pantry and he was drinking it. And but he was also the one that was one of the first people to kind of go into the kitchen, get on the step stool, to your point, and help out. A long line of people on my dad's side of the family are like that. They're consummate cooks. A lot of them are always showing off what they're eating. So that's the thing. It's like that's in my blood. So I can totally relate to what you're saying. All the stuff that you're saying, it makes a lot of sense to me. The website and the YouTube have a lot of really cool, a lot of short videos for prep. You have a style that it's quick. You have very, very factual. And you just say, do this, do this, do this. And I actually appreciated that because like a good minute and a half, 2 minute video on one task is pretty cool. It's something you actually go back to more than once. When you go to theintrepid.eater.com, it shows that you are all about everything from foraging to preserving to fermenting, hunting, fishing, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things that you do in the realm of food preparation and care. There were the seeds planted as a child, but how did all of these things turn from being like interesting ideas into the intrepid eater way of life?
Sure, it's a bit of a long story, I guess, to piece it all together, but
we have time.
Yeah. So like I said, I was super interested in cooking in nature as a kid, food in nature. And there was just these moments in life that really still shine in my memory of when certain things came together. Was, I don't know, maybe as an 8-year-old or so, going for a walk in the woods with my aunt who had married into the family, her brother who was a naturalist. And he showed me, I think the first plant he ever showed me was wintergreen. And wintergreen is like this ground cover kind of plant you can find in the forests. And when you break it apart, it has this wintergreen oil, which is like where you get the gum flavor and everything from.
Right, like a minty chlorophyll, sort of like eucalyptus almost taste.
Yeah, yeah, and I put some in my mouth, like he told me I could eat it, and I was just blown away that you could just find something on the forest floor that tasted like gum, which was crazy to me. And he showed me a couple other things, and that really got me thinking about food outside of my own kitchen.
Right.
Also, a lot of my family were farmers, so I had a lot of farming experiences growing up, like chicken farming, horse farming, pig farming, all those things. And dairy farming. So I got to have all these experiences growing up where I grew up in the city, in the suburbs, but I'd often be on the farm helping out, being in the barns, killing chickens at 12 years old, like doing these things that a lot of city kids don't get to do. And that kept expanding my mind into, once again, food outside of the kitchen, like where this is actually coming from.
Right.
The fact that it tastes better. I've always been a voracious reader.
Right.
And there's this series by this guy called Tom Brown Jr., and it was kind of like wilderness skills and survival skills and everything and stories. And he wrote one book about harvesting wild edibles and foraging, and having had that experience with the wintergreen before, I was really interested in it. And that became kind of a pursuit of mine as a child, even, to find things that I could eat safely in the woods.
Right, right. So forgive me, that part of it, like the wintergreen moment, was at what age?
I'd say probably like 8 years old or so.
So that was a really developmental time for you, like where somebody says, "Here, let's go to the forest and put this in your mouth." Sorry, that sounds bad. Wow. All right. Let me reset that. Where somebody basically shows you something that you can eat from the land, and that just must have put just a giant bug in your head. Just about what, like, you can eat the planet, really. Yeah.
It blazed like a highway of neural pathways, like developing new crazy things going on in my head, like the the possibilities. Especially as a child, you're told always not to eat. Don't eat that. Don't put that in your mouth. Don't put that in your
Right.
mouth. Don't eat that. When you go in the woods, everything's scary and dangerous, going to kill you.
Yeah, it's
Turns out,
counterintuitive. Like in the city, it's a counterintuitive thing to pick something up and eat it, right?
yeah, you probably don't want to do that too much. Cigarette butts don't make the best wild edibles, but
Yeah.
but yeah, to have someone say no, it's okay to eat that if you know what you're doing, if you play it safe, if you do it right, you can eat all these like all sorts of things in the woods, and that just really spoke to me. And I just kept slowly learning that. Like I didn't dive in at first. This is pre-internet, or I guess the internet existed, but we didn't have the internet.
Right.
So it wasn't like I could just like go down in some crazy wormhole easily. Like I would get the odd book from the library if I could find one on it, and there weren't many. And then so it was pretty slow, but I slowly collected items I could forage and eat. And even in the city, like you said, you don't think about it in the city, but in the city, by the time I was a teenager, I was, walking to my friend's house and foraging the whole way there. I'd have these different routes that would, like, different seasons. I could pluck a pear from a pear tree that was hanging over a walkway, or there was, like, raspberry bushes or wild strawberries and different things I could find. Like, I'd be walking around in the woods somewhere on a farm, and I'd find, like, asparagus growing in a ditch. And I could identify asparagus because my grandmother grew a big patch, and I said, well, what the hell? That's just growing in the middle of nowhere. And then I, smell it, and it smells like asparagus, and I tasted it, and it tastes like asparagus, and it's just wild feral asparagus. So you start to like build up this compendium of different wild edibles that are safe to go. And then when the internet came out, when I had access to it, I was like, holy shit, there's so much more, and now I can just like plumb the depths of this crazy knowledge well of anything I want to know. And I've been doing that ever since. So adding that on top of like my mom and grandmother always gardened for vegetables, so I was always in the soil, the farming, the wild. Like I always like cooking. I started at 7, I was cooking for the family by 12, full dinners like on a regular basis.
So at that point, sorry to cut you off, but at that point, was that when at the age of 12, were you volunteering to make dinner, or was this something being asked if you could just help, and then it just sort of took root? Or like, did you really take charge of making dinner, just because that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I really did. Like we were expected to help out in some way or another, like whether it's the dishes or anything, but we weren't expected to cook by any means, and I just wanted to.
Yeah.
And my approach was kind of like, I laugh looking back on it now. My approach was, we had this, the old spice rack on the wall that had like the 30-year-old nutmeg and the
the nutmeg that was twice your age. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And when I started cooking, we ate pretty simply. So it'd be like pork chops or chicken thighs or something baked in the oven.
Yeah.
And I would just put all the spices on. And then I slowly, by process of elimination, I started developing, these ones go good together.
Yeah.
These ones are good if you put lots on or a little on. I didn't put my little toe in. I've always been a dive into the water and or rip off the Band-Aid, like.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What's that? Asparagus? Let me eat that. Yeah, sort of thing. I get it. No, yeah. I totally understand that point of view, because that's really, you're going to types of people, right? Like some people rush in, some people almost obsessively think about it before they move. So it really depends on what your approach is, right? Like there's no right or wrong to the way that this stuff can work. You found your learning process almost unconsciously, and just kind of went with it. And it's great. Like working on your instincts, especially in the world that you're in, is great, because you can always try and fail, but you tried in the beginning and you understood. Okay, maybe cinnamon and chocolate works great, or maybe curry and chocolate doesn't work very well. That kind of thing. I know that the pandemic was a driver for a lot of people leaving cities, and I know that you were living kind of in the Ottawa metropolitan area up until just a few years ago, right? Was moving to the country for you a byproduct of the last 3 years of kind of pandemic life?
My partner and I, Kathy, we kind of act like what we were just saying. We jump headfirst into things, and that's kind of how we live our lives. And we were living in Ottawa, and we were just living in an apartment that we were renting, and we found this cottage that was like kind of this dumpy cottage that had a ton of potential, and it was really good price, and we just bought it and without really thinking about it. And most people buy a house, get settled down, save up their money, and then if they're lucky enough, they get to buy a cottage at some point. But we just bought the cottage, and then we had the apartment, and we both worked in Ottawa.
Right.
So then we're like, we'll just deal with this as it comes, whatever works, because we just wanted this place. So we spent a year of swearing in tears fixing it up, and then we were back and forth. And then when the pandemic hit, we were living in Hull at the time, which is, for those of you who don't know, just right across the river from Ottawa, basically the same area.
Yeah.
And we were living in this tiny little apartment with it, like it wasn't very nice. Well, with this pandemic here, do we want to stay in this little shitty apartment or do we want to go live? So we're like, my job kind of dried up at the time. They weren't sure what was going to happen. So, we weren't brought back. I was working at an organic farm at the time, actually. And my partner was able to work from home. So we just transferred our lives to the cottage, got rid of the apartment, and lived there for 3 years during this whole thing, which was nice. And now we're kind of transitioning back to Ottawa and a back and forth kind of lifestyle, which is also nice. We have friends here, and there's food and music and a lot of stuff we don't get out in the forest.
Yeah.
But it was amazing because I just got to like spend, because I've moved around my whole life. I've been all over the place, never stopping for very long. And just being in one for 3 years just allowed me to fully live with the seasons. Like I was gardening, I was foraging, I was walking every day and just seeing the slow changes of the seasons. I got to meet some people and finally take part in hunting, which I've wanted to do for a long, long time. We got to fish all the time. So it just felt like I was truly for the first time living with the seasons, which is something I always romanticized.
Living in the country probably helped you forage, pardon the pun, the ability to make your content a little bit more with your life. How long has the Intrepid Eater as a website been up and running?
Well, I think I started this whole thing when we escaped to the cottage during the pandemic because, I wasn't working. I kind of hit like a bit of a crisis in my life of like, okay, I've been working these like seasonal jobs forever and I really enjoyed that part of my life. But like, what am I doing? Am I going to keep doing this forever? I was thinking maybe I should go back to school. I was starting to research, like maybe getting a degree. So I have a couple college diplomas, but thought maybe a degree would be better to get me along. It's something I always kind of wanted to do, but never did because I had a very much back in mind for my life and I didn't need a degree for that at the time.
Sure, yeah.
And then I decided I was thinking of doing something with food because I never did get into the food industry. I always kind of wanted to, but not in the restaurant industry. I took this like food and nutrition course through Stanford, like an online kind of, and I was thinking maybe I'll do that and then get into some sort of nutrition or food or something to do with food.
Right.
And in the meantime, maybe I'll just start posting some of my meals and stuff because I never really did that before.
Right.
And I really liked it. And then I thought, maybe screw university. I'm just going to throw caution to the wind like I tend to do and start my own business. Part of the problem with the crisis I was going through at the time was that like I just was having a hard time not being my own boss, I think. I have a lot of ideas, I have a lot of things I want to do, and having the constraints of like a box over me from someone else's points of view, whether it's the organization or individual boss or whatever.
No, for sure.
Yeah, it's beef, I guess. So I thought, to hell with all these plans, I'm going to start a food blog kind of deal.
Yeah.
And then my lovely sister-in-law, she had taken a course in college and had like a website building course. So she helped me design the website. So it's probably 2 years old or so, 2.5 years old. I had a bunch of things that I really wanted. Like I hate when I'm looking for a quick recipe, like say like, how do you sear chicken properly? I know how to do that, but say you're looking... And then you're like, oh, I got to scroll through like 8 pages of what dear hubby was up to and the kids in the laundry.
I know exactly. It was a cold summer night. Oh, man.
Yeah, that drove me nuts. So I'm like, hey, if I'm going to make a recipe website, it's not going to be like that. So I kind of came up with a different way of doing it. Like, if you are interested in my story, if you're interested in hearing all my nonsense day to day, that's where I put it all on social media. So every day I make a post and I write a whole bunch of stuff. And for those who are interested in that kind of thing, they can follow me on there. For those who want a recipe, it's just right there for you. After having read millions of recipes online and being annoyed at certain elements of them, I tried to not replicate those on my own website, and that was very important to me.
No, for sure. And that's a very interesting sort of topic of conversation, really, because like there's a certain segment of food people, and I'm not going to get into a trash talking session, but there is a certain segment of self-important sort of like food writing from critics and stuff like that, rock and reality star chef culture. You not working in the food service industry has probably helped you just based on a lot of the stuff that you hear, all the horror stories, this sort of locker room, on steroids sort of behavior that you hear about in kitchens. So I'm very happy that your point of view is a measured response. You're actually thinking much more of the audience instead of yourself, which I actually find pretty refreshing about your content. Maybe walk me through how you go through like a recipe or like a day of coming up with a recipe.
It starts well before the recipe usually, and
Sure.
I have the notes feature on my phone. There's probably like 2,000 ideas in there. Think of a recipe idea, or if I wake up in the middle of the night, I just write them all down in there. I think I'm the type of person who likes, digging through the rough to find the gem. I've always enjoyed searching for records or old books, or, foraging is like that. You're digging through all these other places to find the one that has, and I kind of follow the same way online. I, go through thousands of recipes looking for the ones that pique my interest. Say I have like a bass, I pulled it at my cottage. What do people do with bass? Well, first of all, they generally don't eat them, which is silly because it's not a great fish. Like people have these preconceived notions, it tastes good and what doesn't. But I tried bass and it's delicious. So I know I'm going to blow that misconception of the way. And then people generally get a fish crisp and fry it in a pan, which is delicious.
It is delicious, yeah. I've done that.
There's nothing wrong with fish crisp, but if I put out 30 fish crisp recipes on my website, it doesn't really make any sense. It's like you toss and then you fry. So I want to step outside the box. I think potentially because I never was cooking in any sort of way whatsoever. I'm completely self-taught, much more of an autodidact than having like any traditional or professional training. And I never worked in the kitchen really. So I don't have all these like preconceived notions and rules and like hard and fast, like, in French cooking, you never do this. In Italian cooking, you never put fish and cheese together. Say.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Those things don't really exist in my head. And if they did, I would try to bust them out anyway. So
yeah.
So I think like, what's stopping you from making meatballs out of fish, or what's stopping you from making an African dish with a bass cut out of the lake? Like there's nothing stopping you from that. But
nothing at all.
People often let their preconceived notions stop them from doing something like that. So that's kind of where the recipes start kind of forming. I want to step out of the box, do something different. And then it comes into something I've struggled with a little bit in my life, because there's different ways of making recipes. And some are to have an idea, you make it, and then you make it again, and then you fine tune it, and you make it again, and you fine tune, you make it again, and you test and test and test, and you your neighbors and friends and family. And eventually you come up with this golden recipe that's really fine-tuned. I don't really do it like that. I just make new things all the time. Like I haven't repeated a dish in 3 years now. Once for a dinner or anything, I just don't repeat dishes at all. So my recipe, the way I do it is I write down my idea, I gather everything, and then I start cooking, and I pay close attention to what I'm putting in. And that was really hard for me because I've always been a handful of this, a pinch of this, whatever kind of person. So I had to really start measuring what I'm doing. Like my handful had to become a quarter cup or whatever,
I'm still bad with the quantities. Like sometimes I've got a heavy salt hand sometimes because my palate is a little bit saltier, I think. But you have to know your audience, right? So my partner, I try to make sure that I'm reining it as much as possible, but sometimes it does make you a better cook, because if you broaden your audience a little bit, you can sort of understand what might serve most people's, favorite flavors and stuff like that, opposed to just your own, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I do like the free jazz approach to cooking too. Like, I'm a sucker for like an improv noodle dish myself. And rarely do the two dishes ever get repeated ever. But I have like obviously some favorites. So that's a big part of what your motivation is when you cook, is just to sort of like come up with ideas and then try to execute on them then.
at first I was very nervous doing it like this because I thought that the only way to do recipes was this like fine-tuned
Conventional
tested,
wisdom
blah, blah,
is against your
yeah.
is not on your side.
Yeah. But then after a while of having the website up, people started contacting me and telling me that this worked out, and I wasn't hearing anything negative. So that kind of let me know that, I was on the right path. Like I wasn't making a mess out of all this. I wasn't putting all these recipes that were completely, people were unable to actually make at home. And I'm very happy with that because that's, I'm not the type of person to be a stickler for things. And I'm glad there's people out there like that because you definitely need both. Yeah, I'm way more free hand, and I enjoy that I can make recipes like that and that people are very happy when they make them.
Great. No, that's awesome. Yeah. It almost seems like you're like doing the TikTok of recipes, right? Like, and I don't mean to diminish it down to a social media platform. You almost want to show people how many ideas there can be.
Yeah, I want to, I guess like if I were to out of this whole thing, it's for people to broaden their horizons with food. Mm-hmm. To break down some of those conventional walls. The food that they eat is capable of so much more than they think.
Right.
And coming up with like a solid chicken recipe that can be made every Tuesday isn't really part of that. There's people out there who do that. They do an amazing job at that. Mm-hmm. And, like the New York Times cooking, whatever, like they have those recipes dialed in. They're freaking amazing. They do a great job. That belongs in where. But for me, I'm more about trying something new, doing something exciting, doing something different. And for the people who are into that, I think they really appreciate it. It's funny, what I've found is that my fan base is retired men. These men who've been, cooking, like they're a good cook their whole life. They cooked for the family, just kind of a normal good cook. And then they retired and then they're like, I really love cooking. I want to really like delve into this now that I have the time. I'm not going to work every day. They want to try new things. And they're open. A lot of them hunt and fish. And it's like, they don't want like a standby recipe. They like that feeds their family anymore. They want to experiment and try something new. And actually had the chance to meet a lot of these guys too. They're quite open to having me over for a beer or something like that. And
that's great.
It's really cool, and I found that's like a really unexpected. I found a lot of people who were interested in my stuff.
Yeah, you're building a community. So there's not just recipe videos. There's also videos on your website and on your YouTube channel that are about techniques. So there's like how to, debone a rabbit, being able to identify good plants and bad plants. One of my favorites was a leaf that you could use as toilet paper in a pinch, but you also found it growing right next to poison ivy. So it was like the most dangerous game that you were playing there, and identifying which plant you can touch your private area with, and the right next to the one that is the worst to even go near you. But there's a lot of technique videos. So aside from recipes, are the technique videos going to be something that you have growing in there as well? Or are you going to try to stick to food recipes for now?
I think I'd rather do the technique videos. They're a lot more handy to a cook. A recipe can be good, but a technique can give you the basis to do any number of recipes. Those techniques are way more like form like a solid, good basis. And the more techniques I learn, the more I add. And I think it's beneficial for everyone to learn more of that too. So I'd like to focus on that more. I need to do more videos too. Videos have been like the hardest part of this whole thing for me. It was a pretty steep learning curve, learning like all the software and the editing and the lighting and the sound and it's crazy.
I could commiserate with you about that for like an entire hour by itself. Yeah. Once you start going into the production rabbit hole, you do not know when you're going to be released from that rabbit hole. But the production aspect is definitely something you can't overlook. For myself, I'm actually doing it as a talking head. So I set up conversations and we talk. I'm not deboning a rabbit or breaking down a chicken or walking people through the best things that you can touch your rear end with versus the worst. It must be pretty daunting to sort of like learn all this stuff at the same time. How long does it take for you to put together the videos and stuff like that?
It's a pretty big challenge, and the time needed has gone down quite a bit from when I started.
Right.
I really enjoyed when I was a kid watching, like the Urban Peasant, kind of these long, dreamy shows where they just slowly did things, and I really enjoyed that a lot, and that's kind of what I wanted at first. It was just so much editing and took so long, and I'm really bad at like, hey, Berkelmans, and today I'm making, like, I can talk forever about food, but the minute I have to have a remembered thing to say, like, I just takes me like 100 takes, and those just weren't many views because people on the internet don't want to sit for 40 minutes and watch something
attention spans being what they are. Yeah, absolutely.
So I switched over. Actually, it was kind of good. There was a company that approached me and asked me to make some videos with their products in the video.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, if I don't have to think about your product and I don't have to do anything, and you just and I just use it, and it's a good product, I don't mind doing that.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're like, but we want our videos to be around a minute long. Well, at first I filmed 4 hours and edited it down to a minute. And then I got better at it and was able to do more half an hour and bring it all down in a minute. And, that was a great exercise. Taught me how to better edit, how to condense things in a way that made sense. Because I see a lot of these TikTok and Instagram videos and whatever, and they're just garlic salt, onion salt, paprika, bam, 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 bam. And there's no way you could ever even pause that to make something. You're just watching it for entertainment purposes. There's no way you could ever replicate that. Yeah. So I was trying to make it so it was fast, but still doable. You could still watch the video and make what I was making. Yeah. And that's a tight balance to walk on, but I don't know. I don't know how good I did it.
honestly, I was binging some of your videos the other day, and you do a really good job of making it very quick. Every second in your videos, it's another step. It's very measured speech. And the action is there as you're speaking. So honestly, in terms of conveying that information in a way that is consumable, I think you nailed it, honestly. A lot of it is just really well done. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that because a lot of as a content creator, and I'm sure you feel it, you don't know how it's received out there. You're putting it out there and you don't know how it's going to be received or if you're doing it right. So to hear that it's...
Yeah. The strangest thing for me so far has had your best friends and your closest partners in life giving you feedback on your conversation with somebody else. I'm very appreciative of you to have this conversation with me, and we can even commiserate a little bit about production because it's definitely I'm not old hat at this at all. I'm still I did 12 years of radio, and now I'm doing video, and I'm learning how to edit myself, for the first time. Mm-hmm. Let's go back into your world a little bit more in depth. We were talking about your approach to recipes and stuff like that. Are you usually doing a combination of whatever your curiosity is food-wise with whatever your curiosity is earth-wise, and then just seeing if there's something there?
Yeah, to a degree. There's definitely, I go through phases of curiosity, but then there's also seasons. The food I tend to obtain that's not from the grocery store is very seasonal driven. So even farms, certain animals will be ready at certain times, certain plants will come out at certain times. Even if the fish are always there in the lake, you're not allowed to catch them all year round. There's only certain times you can catch them. So there's things I'm obtaining from nature seasonally. Yeah. And then that matches up with whatever I'm obsessed about at the time. Whether I suddenly in love with Turkish cooking and I'm whipping through the pages, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And then I can use what I'm finding to fit in with that current obsession. Yeah. Or West African food or regional Chinese cooking or something like that. Sure. Whatever I'm getting at the time kind of fits in with whatever I'm obsessed with at the time. And I'm always obsessed with something. So
yeah. Your personality is almost, you're as adventurous as you are obsessive. So, you might have obsessions, but you also move around a lot. So the obsession eye is almost, it's like a magnetic force field. It's like squirrel, and maybe it's literally a squirrel.
It has been.
No, I'm sure it has. Let's actually talk about that. There are some meats that you've eaten that probably not a lot of people who are watching this have ever eaten. There's a few that I recall, but maybe there's even some that you can sort of enlighten me to. But you've had squirrel. Yep. Okay, coyote. Yeah. Wasn't there an animal that got hit and you guys found a way to basically use as much of it as possible?
Yeah, that was beaver. All things.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. It was a beaver. Yeah. Which is obviously, it's tragic to beaver, and much respect to all animal life. I mean, I'm not trying to make a platform or anything. This is really about the respect for everything that planet Earth has to offer. So just throwing it out there. I'm not being disrespectful. It's not like where there's Guy Fieri who plays with seafood when he's doing ridiculous stuff with squids and stuff. So I just wanted to differentiate that. But what was it like working with that particular animal? Once you found it,
without getting into too much, my partner and I were driving to town, which is like a 15-minute drive, stopped, grabbed something really quick, and came back, and there was a beaver on the side of the road that wasn't there before. So very fresh. It wasn't damaged in any real way. And, I had to process it and everything myself. And I'd never done that with the before. I never cooked beaver before. There's very few online for it. So it was kind of this like...
Yeah, it's pretty uncharted, really.
Yeah. It's like, what's the Star Trek thing? Like the John Picard's intro.
Oh yeah.
On it right now, but like
to go where no one has gone before, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And so a few people have gone there. I'm not the first one by any means.
Sure. Yeah.
And the first thing you always do, you encounter like a new piece of meat that you never cooked with before. You cut a little piece off. You cook in a frying pan with salt and pepper, and just try it as it is, basically. And it was really good. And that really fits into what I'm doing too, in terms of like getting people's attention with the Intrepid Eater stuff. How many recipes for chicken are there online? I don't know how many millions and millions and millions of recipes pop up.
You're up to zillions at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. How many beaver recipes are there online? And if my website can have some beaver recipes on it, that means I'll be the first one to pop up when the odd person is Googling. So that's really beneficial to me, only to feed my own curiosity and adventure in trying it, but also for my business to be able to stand out by having some of these like not creatures that I've been obtaining and cooking up. So I'm always excited to come up with interesting recipes for that kind of thing too.
Yeah, and by no means are we talking about crawling into a wooden dam with a knife in your teeth and trying to like actively like seek out the beaver. It's like this is happenstance that turns into opportunity. So again, and believe me, I'm not. This isn't a judgmental thing. It was more just it's fascinating to me that like people would just look at that and move on. But for yourself, you see the opportunity in freak occurrences sometimes that turn into opportunities, kind of like the recipes you make in and of themselves. It almost seems like you're on brand. Yeah.
If there's a point I can make briefly.
Please do. Yes.
That was something that I had to come to terms with a little bit in creating a platform for myself that's very public. Like I do hunt, I do butcher, I do kill, I do, these are things that I do to obtain my food.
Yeah.
And public with that, but how public should I be? There's some people out there, like say a good example is Martin Picard from Au Pays de Cochon restaurant. He's very in your face with the fact that something died to feed you. He doesn't stray back on that. It's really cool the way he does that, but it's something that my kind of goal was to take people gently by the hand, expose them to a new something, whether it's new food or new cuisine, in the way that they are most likely to enjoy it and not be scared off, taking them one foot outside their comfort zone and then another step and another step.
Sure.
So like there's nothing wrong with chicken pad Thai for someone who's never tried Thai food before. You don't have to start with like insanely spicy, crazy stuff. You can start off gently, and I wanted to take the same approach with the Intrepid Eater, and having some gruesome pictures of hunting and of death on there doesn't really fit into that. Even though I think that is sometimes important in other ways to people out of the fact that, like, the thing from the grocery store on the styrofoam mat that you're eating was alive at one point.
Right.
So I had to make a decision of how much I wanted to show. Well, I'm not going to show the dead animals themselves. I'm not going to get too gruesome. Definitely no grip and grin.
Grip and grin.
So it's kind of like gripping the antlers and I think it's a misunderstood thing. A lot of people would have a very hard time understanding why you'd want to do that, but the adrenaline and elation you're feeling at the time and the pride really kind of plays in, and you never understand that fully until you did it yourself.
Yeah,
but that's not my style. Not my style. I don't do it, and I wasn't gonna portray myself doing that on the Intrepid Eater. So I wasn't gonna back away from, say, like deboning a rabbit or something where I'm showing meat, but I chose not to show the dead animal in the process getting there.
Sure. Yeah.
There may be one day where I get maybe a separate something that I do get more into that for people who are interested in, like
maybe a paywall sort of
in
thing.
Those things.
So
but it's not it's not my. I don't want people to be scared off from maybe trying wild game or being open to the thought of wild game or trying something new. I want them to lead them gently into it, expose them, and even if they don't try it, just open their minds a little bit towards it, you know, that it's people can approach things in a different manner. It doesn't all have to be the way you do it. Being cognizant of people's feelings towards and animals and eating animals and death and all these things like definitely plays into that. So it's something I put a lot of thought into it anyways. And I continue to think about it as my page grows and as change and progress. It's always kind of at the forefront of my mind.
What you do is kind of the embodiment of at least the term dirty work. You're picking berries and herbs, and you are finding things in the wild, and then you're taking them home and you are preparing them. But you put a lot of care into it. Like, you're not exactly a chuck wagon kind of guy. I'm actually curious where the appreciation for the cooking techniques came from. Like, do you have any role models, friends, family, even celebrities? Like, are there any sort of cooking touchstones that you usually kind of go to as a sense of comfort?
A little bit, yeah. Generally steer clear of food celebrities. They upset me more than anything else.
Yeah.
The Food Network being like the main culprit in that. God, I hate it.
Yeah.
But,
well, it became the MTV food, right? Because like MTV doesn't show music anymore, and it's the same kind of idea.
Yeah, same thing. And
old man yells at cloud.
Exactly. Yeah. I was so disappointed when it changed over, but I'd say if there's one food celebrity, and it's probably cliche even now to say it, but it's Anthony Bourdain. Like, reading his books, watching him at first, zeal for travel, his appreciation of peasant food and the common man's food, and not just like this like crazy elegant French dining, which I barely care for a lot of it. Like, I'd much rather eat some like mom and pop, stand with an umbrella on it in the middle of Mexico or Thailand, serving something to me for $1 than having lobster throw the nicest French restaurant in the world. Like,
sure. Yeah.
That's kind of my style of things. And he really was one of the first to really like show that and appreciate it. And reading, I had all these vague thoughts like swirling in my head, and then he wrote them, and then they just all like made sense something and formed into actual real opinions and thoughts. And they weren't always his, but I think his writing really crystallized my own thoughts on the matter, and I was very sympathetic to a lot of the things that he said too. So I'd say out of anyone, it's him, and I'd say pretty much 99.9% of every chef or cook will say the same thing. But that just shows kind of how influential he was in the way he thought. Like, I've read hundreds and hundreds of cookbooks. I watched food television avidly when I was a child. To the story, 14 or 15 years old or so, I was foraging for trash, walking down the road, and I found this little TV. I'm like, sweet. So I brought it home, and my mom was like, there's no way you're going to have a TV in your bedroom. Like, no, I'm going to be watching something porn on it or something awful. And I argued, and I finally, no, I'm doing it. I'm holding on to this. And what did I watch all night till 3 a.m? The Food Network. Just soaked it in. I couldn't get enough of it. And this was once again before the new Food Network, whatever. It was all these. I was just learning so much.
Yeah, there were a lot of cooking shows at its inception, for sure. Like, I mean, you had cooking show, like different cooking show after cooking show every half hour. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was just like forever. And I would go to Kohl's or Chapters or whatever as like a 15-year-old, and with my money that I got from working at Burger King, and I would go to the discount bin and buy cookbooks and just read them through like novels. And I still do that all the time. For a while in high school, I wanted to be a chef. I was kind of aiming myself towards that, and decided, which I think was a very wise decision for me at the time as a teenager.
Yeah.
But that I love the outdoors and nature too much to become a chef. Like, I don't want to work weekends. I don't want to work nights. I want to be outside. I can cook and be outside if I get into that career. So I chose more of an outdoor career. I was an arborist, farmer, trail building, conservation, riparian restoration. I did all these, like, I was a backcountry ranger for a while. So I did all these outdoor jobs and then cooked all the time, which worked out perfectly for me. But despite that, having never been trained, I was reading all these books and watching all this food television. And then when I had access to the internet, that was a whole new thing too. So I think that's where I really developed those, like, as you say, like kind of the chefier techniques, and I got to choose exactly what I learned. Like, I didn't have like a chef at a culinary school telling me you have to learn all these things. Like, there's basic chef that I don't know, which is funny to me sometimes and a little embarrassing other times. But the ones that I want, I adopt into my cooking style. The ones I don't have a use for, I just leave out. I can't make an omelet. I can't make a perfect omelet. They say that's the sign of a good chef anywhere in the world, is that if they can make like a perfect French omelet.
Yeah.
No chance I could make. No chance I could make a perfect French omelet unless I practice. And,
That's hard.
I don't eat much, so I don't care. And I don't need to do that, and I don't need to impress anyone with it. So I guess that's where, like, to answer your question, that like my approach is chefy, but it's not totally chefy either. It's a little bit of everything.
Right. It's funny too. You mentioned the French omelet thing. My Achilles heel with eggs, if I'm making 4 eggs for 2 people, the third egg yolk will always break. Every time. It's the third. It's never the fourth, never the first. It's always the third. It's like a weird quirk that my physicality has. Like I crack and it's broken. So
yeah,
it's always like, all right, who gets broken yolk? But my partner, God bless her, she always says, I'll take it. I'm like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
What are the next sort of big steps for the Intrepid Eater as a platform? Like, what are your aspirations, goals for the channel, let's say, in the next couple of years?
I'd like to get more videos. That's something that's been kind of nagging at me, like, to do that. And I'm hoping this year, as the snow all melts here, that I'm able to do more foraging videos.
Foraging, yeah.
I want to do more of a physical, now that the pandemic seems to be over, do in-person workshops. I do a lot better in person often than filming myself. So if I can able to take out groups and do foraging or outdoor cooking, or even rent like the kitchen at Loblaws or whatever and do different things, I would love to get to that point. I've also been working really closely with this organization called Harvesting Nature, who's out of the States, and they're kind of like a wild food multimedia platform. And they hired me on recently as a managing editor. So I've been working with them a lot, and I'm going to be doing a ton of traveling, doing like wild pig hunting and cooking workshops. I'm going to Montana with them. They've got different workshops in the works. So I think I'll be traveling a lot, which would be really cool. Because I love traveling. To be able
the last 3 years have been tough. The travel situation, especially in 2020 and 2021, was really hard. It was road trip or nothing, and you always had to make sure everybody was healthy if you're meeting with people. And
pretty rough time for us.
Still can be, but
now we got if I can just keep pushing this Intrepid Eater thing to new levels and make differences in people's lives and open their minds up about food. I think that one of the things this year I really want to do too is start a shop up, some gear, Intrepid Eater gear and stuff like that. My next big step, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you had a hat. You had a hat made for yourself, right? Like, did you start selling the hat on your website at all? There was the Intrepid Eater. That was actually
that was a birthday present that someone else had made for me.
Oh, that's adorable.
Which was an amazing gift. I was very happy with that. I'm hoping to have that replicated basically as like something to have in the store eventually. I just got to learn all about Shopify and all this stuff now. Just to add another thing to the learning curve.
That's right. We were talking a lot about seasons throughout this episode. Why don't we go through each season and you tell me maybe your favorite couple of things to eat or pull in for each of those seasons. We'll start with spring. Name me a couple of things that you love to actively look for, whether it be vegetable, animal, mineral, whatever.
I'm like a huge mushroom hunter. Like I love mushrooms. So the spring is morel mushrooms. They pop out, and finding them, I was talking about the grip and grin earlier, and the adrenaline and all that stuff you get when you're hunting. I get that same feeling when I'm hunting for mushrooms and I come up, flush of morels or something. I'm just like, I just feel about it. And then I get to not only find it, but I'll bring it home, cook with it, and eat it, which I love every step of that process. Yep. And I spend a lot of time looking for them every year. Not always with great success. I spend a lot of time out. And it's even nice just walking around after a whole winter of snow, like just walking in the woods with my dog and searching. It's really fun.
Yeah.
Then there comes with like the vegetable would be like fiddleheads, which I always enjoy.
They're delicious. I love the spiral of the fiddlehead too. And they're available usually in the late spring. I think it's May. May is like the fiddlehead season, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And they're just lovely, pretty little vegetables. Like they're, like that. You get them at a certain time of year that makes them extra special. And then fishing, there's this fish called the bullhead catfish. And they run in the spring, and they're a really tasty little treat, like one of the first fish you can catch. So that's my springtime. That's what I'm most excited for every spring.
Excellent. What about summertime?
Summertime, chanterelle mushrooms.
Which
are another favorite of mine. And they're these beautiful golden trumpets that pop out of the earth. Coming across them is beautiful and exciting, and they taste so good and they smell so good. They smell like apricots, kind of. You can often, where like other mushrooms like morels, if you live up in the Yukon and you're on old fire burns, you can find like bags and bags and bags of morels. But I usually find it like a dozen morels or 20. But chanterelles, I can usually fill some bags up of them in the summer. So I get to tons of recipes with them and eat them a lot, which is great. The vast majority of the summer, my face is stained red from raspberries and strawberries and blackberries.
Damn right.
I'm just slamming as I walk.
Slamming berries.
Yeah. Not too many of them make it home too often. I don't have a lot of recipes with berries because
You're like, look, I have some berries. I was picking them all day, and then your faces, you just look like a baby that was eating spaghetti. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Getting into fall, you'll notice that mushrooms are on every seasons because they're my favorite. Fall for all that's the majority of mushrooms coming out of the fall. So I'm looking for chick of the woods and hen of the woods and porcini and just all sorts of different ones. This is probably my favorite to find, which is also called the maitake. They grow at the base of an oak tree, and some I've found are huge. The Japanese call them the dancing mushroom because if you find one, lucky enough to find one in the forest, you do a little dance. You're so happy. And I get it because it's very exciting to find. They just sit like a gift at the bottom of an oak tree. So I love finding those. And then your dishes are starting to get a little more homey and a little more slow cooked. So often I'll help out homesteading friends and everything with butchering pigs and stuff, so I'll end up with a lot of pork in the fall, and that's where a lot of wild game like duck and goose and venison, that's all in the fall. So
that's all the hunting seasons and stuff for sure. Yeah, it's all in the autumn. All right, and then winter I'm ice fishing for pike and crappie. There's not much else to find out there. I'm doing a lot more super slow cooked. I'm going into the freezer and breaking out a lot of the wild game and stuff that I've procured over the year. But there's one mushroom I found a lot this year. It's called the amber jelly. I don't know if you're familiar with the Chinese black ear fungus. It's you spring rolls and stuff like that sometimes. No, not. Please enlighten me.
Okay. Yeah, you can just get them at an Asian store. They're just this black. I know fungus sounds like a gross word to a lot of people.
No, it's fungus can be food. I got it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a black fungus that you can find in Chinese grocery stores or Asian grocery stores.
Yeah, and it's dry. They dry really easy and they reconstitute really easily, and they soak up whatever flavors you want to put in them. So they don't have a ton of flavor themselves. But there's something like that I've been finding a lot in the woods in the winter, and they grow on oak branches.
Oh wow!
And they're just these little mushrooms. They don't have a lot of taste, but I can literally pick them, throw them in my pocket when I'm walking the dog, bring them home, throw them in a bowl, and they'll dry in a day or two, and then I can store them for the whole year. Wow. And then they dry speck, like a pencil lead almost, and then they reconstitute into something the size of like a quarter or more. So
oh wow,
yeah, and they don't have a ton of flavor, but they never flavor to put in.
They're a sponge, basically.
Yeah, one wintertime mushroom to find. There's not much else to find in the winter. And then chaga as well, which is I'm actually drinking a chaga coffee mix right now. It's like a fungus that grows on birch trees and is you dry and then grind in tea or coffee, and it's more of a medicinal thing than an edible mushroom. But yeah,
right.
That's something I always look forward to finding too.
Excellent. Wow, we've just defined all the seasons with mushrooms, so that's not bad. That's actually not a bad way to kind of wrap it up. Adam, I wanted to extend you a huge thank you for taking the time to speak with me, to free up some time to wax poetic about mushrooms as we just did, and to talk about food and your point of view. I learned stuff today. I think the people who watched learned a few things about food that maybe they didn't know before they walked in. So thank you very much for taking the time. I would love if you were to talk about your all of your platforms, just tell the people where they can find you, where they can see more of, see if we can kind of fall into a content K-hole like I did the other day.
Yeah, so once again, it's the intrepideater.com. If you want these travel logs, how-to videos, all that kind of stuff, it's all site. You can go to YouTube and find me as Adam Berkelmans or the Intrepid Eater. On Facebook, I'm the Intrepid Eater, and on Instagram, I'm the.intrepid.eater. Pay attention if you're in the Ottawa or like Ontario kind of region. I will be having in-person workshops and stuff like that coming up, so pay attention to that. If you're interested in trying out hunting or wild food, there's also workshops we do in Texas and all over the States and Canada. So like, give me a follow and check it out and come explore with me. It's fun and tasty.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're a retired man, invite Adam over for a beer. It seems to be the currency that he's trading in these days. Adam, thanks again. Take care. Keep on eating, man. Keep it going. Doing that dirty work.
Well, thanks a lot, Dennis. It's great having a good, long, focused chat with you.